On the day my wife gave birth to the child of her first love who was terminally ill, she had my in-laws deploy 10 bodyguards outside the delivery room to prevent me from stopping the birth. She thought that if I came to see her the next day, she would forgive all our previous arguments. She was even willing to let me be the child's father. The day Audley was discharged from the nursing home, I had just finished handing over my work at the hospital. As I reached the doorway, I heard laughter coming from inside. This child is beautiful, with big eyes just like his father's. My mother-in-law was happily playing with the baby in her arms, while Kieran was bringing out a steaming bowl of chicken soup from the kitchen. I made this soup myself. Your body is still weak, you need to eat well to recover, he said, sitting by the bedside and tenderly feeding Audley. The atmosphere was that of a happy family. My father-in-law was holding a rattle, grinning from ear to ear. This child is so adorable, just like his father. It's a good thing he's not Jude's child. Having a doctor for a father would be such a burden. My hand tightened on the doorknob. I remembered the first time I met my father-in-law. He had patted my shoulder, saying being a doctor was good, that saving lives brought honor to the whole family. He had told me he was once a doctor too, and if it weren't for an injury caused by a violent patient, he wouldn't have retired early. But now, he was saying doctors weren't fit to have families. I had only been away for a year of advanced studies, and this family had already completely shut me out. I lowered my head, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Audley and I had been married for 3 years. She had said she didn't want children, and understanding the risks of childbirth, I didn't pressure her. I still remember the day I left for my studies abroad. She had cried, saying she would miss me terribly. For the past year, we had called each other every day, sharing our lives. Even my colleagues would tease us, saying we still acted like newlyweds after 3 years of marriage. But just a month ago, when I finally managed to get some time off to come home, despite being exhausted from an 8-hour flight, I rushed back without complaint, only to find Audley heavily pregnant, standing next to her first love. My thoughts were interrupted by Kieran's words. Jude, when did you get back? Why are you standing in the doorway? Hearing him, the others in the room looked towards the entrance. When my father-in-law saw the resignation letter in my hand, his brow furrowed deeply. How could I have entrusted my daughter to someone like you? What bad luck. Now you're quitting your job, expecting us to support you? Is this how you act as a husband? My mother-in-law chimed in accusingly. You can't even handle such a good job. What else can you do? Audley's body is delicate now. She and the baby need money for everything. If you don't work, are you expecting a family of 3 to live on air? Hearing this, I could only laugh bitterly. Whoever's wife and child they are, it's their responsibility to provide for them. Jude Wilson, what are you saying? How can you be so irresponsible? Audley finally couldn't hold back, shouting at me with reddened eyes. Seemingly overcome with emotion, she clutched her chest and began coughing violently. If Kieran hadn't saved me from that car accident 3 years ago, I might have died already. His parents are both gone, and now he's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. In a short while, there might be no one left in the world to remember him. Why do you always have to be against him? Do you really think I'm that kind of dirty, immoral woman? Kieran stroked her back soothingly, while turning to me with a pained expression. Jude, please don't say any more. I know this is all my fault. I promise I won't appear in your lives again after this. Please don't let me affect your marriage. I looked at the 4 people before me, who had clearly already formed a united front against me, and found it increasingly laughable. So this was what a real family looked like. Just then, Audley suddenly spoke up. Jude Wilson, my patience has limits too. If you dare to target Kieran again without reason, don't bother coming back to this house. If you still want to continue our life together, just keep quiet. At next week's full month celebration for the baby, I can announce in front of all our relatives and friends that you're the child's father. Next week? I glanced at the baby, now asleep in the carrier. Next week, I would be embarking on my journey abroad. But before I left, I didn't mind giving them an unforgettable surprise. I nodded, my expression unchanged. Fine. After saying that, I turned and went back to the bedroom to pack my things, ignoring their reactions. Since I had decided to leave for good, I didn't want to leave any trace of myself here. The sounds of laughter from the living room filtered through the door. I paused briefly as I was folding clothes. Kieran, I want to give this child your surname. That way, even if he calls someone else Dad in the future, he'll always remember that you're his true father. Even without seeing it, I could imagine the loving expression on Audley's face as she said this. And my heart, already riddled with wounds from her, ached once more. I suddenly thought back to last month when I had rushed home, carrying souvenirs I had specially bought for Audley from abroad. But at our doorstep, I saw Audley and Kieran returning from a walk, hand in hand. Unlike the look of horror on Audley's face, Kieran had eyed me with confusion, asking if I had the wrong apartment. I said nothing, my gaze fixed on Audley's swollen belly. After 11 months away, my wife was pregnant. There was no way I could deceive myself into thinking this child was mine. Until Audley hurriedly stepped in front of Kieran to introduce me. This is my husband, Jude Wilson. I had thought that hearing this, Kieran would show some restraint, but instead, he invited me into my own home like he was the man of the house. As we passed each other, he said in a voice only I could hear, I heard you're quite a bit older than me. I guess I should call you brother then, considering your wife is carrying my child. Hot blood rushed to my head, and I could no longer contain myself. I swung my fist, landing a solid punch on his face. I had completely lost control. The 11 months of longing for Audley during our separation transformed into pure rage. If I had had a knife in my hand at that moment, I might have killed them both. It wasn't until the neighbors heard the commotion and called the police that we were all taken to the station, but because it was a domestic matter, the police couldn't intervene much and just sent us home. As soon as we got back, my in-laws, who had rushed over after hearing the news, started berating me without even asking what had happened. They scolded me for causing such a scene as soon as I returned, making us the laughingstock of the neighborhood. They even berated me for wasting all those years of education, resorting to violence, and threatened that if anything serious had happened, they wouldn't let me off easy. It turned out they had known all along about Audley and Kieran being together, and were even strongly supportive of it. In just a year's time, Kieran had become their perfect son-in-law. Only I had been kept in the dark. There was a bitter taste in my mouth, and I felt utterly miserable. Audley tremblingly walked to my side, trying to take my hand and reason with me. I never meant to betray you. Kieran is very ill. The doctors say he has at most 6 months to live. I couldn't bear to see him leave without an heir. I had thought about discussing it with you before, but you were so far away, and I didn't want to worry you and disrupt your studies. That's why I planned to wait until you returned to tell you. If you're willing, can we raise this child together? Such a major life decision as having children, yet she spoke of it so casually. I put the last piece of clothing into my suitcase just as my mother-in-law pushed open the door and walked in. Seeing the suitcase at my feet, she wore an expression that seemed to say, at least you know your place. You haven't been back for so long, so I let Kieran sleep in your room. Now the study has been turned into a nursery too. You'll have to make do with the living room couch tonight, or maybe you should just go stay at a hotel.